Hi everyone, it's Lindsay. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be sharing 3 different ways and ideas on how you can stamp through your stencils. But before I do that, I want to remind you to follow me across social media. All of those links are going to be down in the description box below. Also, while you're down there, if you enjoyed this video and if you enjoy my channel, you can subscribe and like this video. It always helps so much. For my first card, I'm going to be using this stencil from the Crafter's Workshop. Now, all the supplies I'm using, everything is going to be listed down in the description box in the order I show it in the video. So that way, if you have a question about a stencil or maybe an ink color and you want to find something similar in your stash, you can go check out those links down below. So the first thing I do is position my stencil. I'm only going to show you this once because it gets a little repetitive, but I like to line it up over my card panel, whatever size it may be, and tape it down from the front with some painter's tape. Then I can flip it over to the back and tape it down from the back side. Flip it back over and remove that smaller piece of tape on the front. This just allows me to get a really good placement without having any tape marks on my paper. So I have it cut to an A2 size. I'm not going to need to do any more cutting to it later on. Now, to put some color on this card, I'm going to do some ink blending. I'm using 2 different colors of Catherine Pooler ink for this. I started off with some Lime Rookie. I'm using my makeup blending brushes. These are the cheap ones from Amazon. I will have links to them down below. I have done a review on these as well. I don't have any shedding or anything from these. They clean really easily, and I'll show you how I clean them in just a moment. Now, once I had down the Lime Rookie, I wanted to darken up the edges, so I came in with a little bit of grass skirt and just blended that in from the outside just towards the inside, just a tiny bit. Then, once I was happy with the ink blending, I'm going to go ahead and clean off my brush very quickly and show you how I do that. I like to go ahead and take it to a piece of scrap paper and just rub off all the color that I can get off. Most of the time this is enough. However, I'll show you what to do if you have a little bit of a stubborn color. Like VersaFine Clear is a little bit more difficult to get off. It's a pigment ink. I take a cloth, spray a little bit of alcohol on it, and just wipe my brush onto that. It's not a lot of liquid. It is alcohol, so it's going to dry very quickly, dissipate off of there, and you don't have to worry about your brushes starting to smell. If you ever want to give them a deeper clean, clean them just like you would any other makeup brush with a nice gentle soap like a baby shampoo, and then let them air dry. Really, really simple and easy to take care of them. To put through the stamping, I'm going to use a background stamp for my first example. This is from Joy Claire Stamps, and I'm going to go ahead and ink it up with some VersaFine Clair Twilight ink, which is a nice navy ink. It's also a pigment ink. It's going to stay wet for a little bit longer. I'm going to ink that stamp up really, really well. And I like to use stamps like this that don't have a very defined pattern to them. You can use something like flowers, really intricate pieces if you want background stamps. Just know you're not going to be able to do what I'm about to do here. So I lay mine down over the stencil and I give it a good press. Now, if you're using an intricate stencil that has a very detailed background and it has a certain pattern on it that you want to keep, you need to make sure that you press this really well. I'm not doing that good of a job here because with this, it's more of a shattered background. So once I pull that up, if I feel there's any spaces where I want a little bit more ink or a little bit more of that texture, I'm going to go back in and press it down again. This isn't a defined pattern, so I can do that. However, if you are using a background stamp that does have that defined pattern, make sure you're giving it a good press the first time. That way you don't come back in and you don't fill in all those little pieces. You can also do it with a defined pattern, not press it as well, and get a more distressed look. This is a really versatile technique that you can just kind of go with and make it how you want to make it. So once I had that exactly how I wanted it, I felt like I had enough blue on there. I'm going to go ahead and lift up my stencil, and there is a look at my first background. I absolutely love the way this turned out. It's very minimal, but having that little bit of texture from the stamping really helps bring this background to a whole new level. Now, to clean out VersaFine Clair off your stencils, I like to use alcohol. I just give it a little spritz. I have a water bottle and an alcohol bottle that I use for cleaning in my craft room. Give it a spritz with your alcohol. Now you can just wipe it off, but you can also make some really cool backgrounds out of this. So I grabbed a piece of extra cardstock and I'm just going to press that right down on the center. This does have a little bit of that Catherine Pooler ink, but it picks up too with the alcohol, so no big deal here. It'll mix together and create a really fun background. And there, look at that. That is so much fun. Now this one I didn't turn into a card, but I have done this technique before. I'll leave this video linked in the top right hand corner where you can see this background. And I did make that one into a card, which was really fun. So to finish this card off, I did cut down the background really simply and added a border right underneath it. I added a prayer sentiment through the top of the pattern and added a few little Nuvo drops in each one of those little flowers. That is a look at the finished card. Very simple and easy to finish off. Now on to the second card. Again, I'm using a 12 by 12 stencil for this card. I just find the larger openings work better for showing off this technique, but it can be done with the 6 by 6 stencil as well. I went ahead and lined up my panel. Again, it's an A2 white cardstock panel that I just cut down, and I'm going to do some ink blending on this one. You can just stamp through these if you wanted to. I like to add a little bit of a background to hold the stamping, if you will. Again, I'm using my makeup blending brushes, and I'm using some Catherine Pooler inks. You can use any inks that blend really well to make your background. Just make sure you're using colors that complement each other and work well. I used Party Dress, Flirty Fuchsia, and Something Borrowed. I just went ahead and used the same brush between all of these colors, and it worked out perfectly. So I started off with the Party Dress, and I'm doing it in a little bit of a half oval shape to go with the direction of the stencil. Whenever I felt like I had enough of that party dress on, I came in with my mid-tone color, which is my Flirty Fuchsia, and put that right in the center, again following that half oval color. I'll blend back and forth between the party dress and the Flirty Fuchsia until I feel like I get a good blend between the two of those. Then I can go ahead and put the party dress ink away. I'm going to keep the Flirty Fuchsia out because I'll still need it to blend with the Something Borrowed, which is my blue ink. I like to clean off in between each ink just to get that excess ink off, especially when working with really strong colors like this. Next up, I came in with that Something Borrowed, and I'll come in at the very bottom with that and blend that up towards the Flirty Fuchsia. Now, once I feel like I have enough of the Something Borrowed on there, I can come in and start blending between the Something Borrowed and the Flirty Fuchsia until I feel like everything's really well blended. Now, you're going to have to excuse my voice today. I have a cold or something going on, and it's that kind where my throat gets so dry and then I start having a coughing fit. So you'll have to excuse me and my talking the past couple of videos. It's been rough this whole winter season with this family, I tell ya. So once I had that done, I'm going to leave the stencil on and set it aside while I get my next little stamp ready. Now for this, I'm actually going to do the rubber band technique. This is an older technique and it's super duper easy. You don't need a ton of products. You just need an acrylic block or any kind of block you might have on hand and some rubber bands. You just put the rubber bands around your acrylic block and make a nice little pattern. Doesn't matter how you put them on, how tight you put them on, how loose you put them on. You just want them to stay on there and create your own little stamp. Now this is a great technique to do just plain backgrounds on if you wanted to, but I found it works really well to create some of these stenciled backgrounds where you stamp through them. It's a really neat texture that goes through. So once I feel like I have enough of the rubber bands on, that is going to be the stamp that I stamp with. You can play around with the placement of these as much as you want. I just put them on there and kind of let it happen how it was going to happen. For the stamping for this, I'm going to use the Catherine Pooler Midnight ink. Any black ink would do here. You just want a nice contrasting color from your background, and I thought the black went really well with this whole color scheme and also the kind of feel of the stencil I'm using. You ink up your stamp that you made with your acrylic block and your rubber bands, and you stamp it down through that stencil. This isn't going to be perfect, but that's kind of the whole feel of this technique. And that is the rubber band technique. It creates some really neat texture in your backgrounds. You can do as much or as little of this as you want. I just continued to stamp until I felt like I had enough on there, and every little stenciled opening had a little bit of that texture on there. Again, just keep going until you're happy with it. Then, whenever you feel like you have enough, you can go ahead and peel off your stencil, and there is the second background. This one is my favorite by far. I love the way this turned out. It's so graphic and cool. It kind of reminds me of like an old 90s pattern that would have been on pants or something, or Saved by the Bell backgrounds. I don't know. That's what it reminds me of. But there is a closer look at that. To finish the card off, I went ahead and cut it up a little bit. I like to do that with some of my backgrounds. I put a little dimension on the top and bottom layers and put the middle layer flush against the card base. I layered up several Celebrate die cuts to create a nice chipboard effect, and added a little bit of the sparkle pico embellishment on top of that for the shine. I also put a few of the dark blue jewels from Cat Scrappiness just around the finished card for a completed look. All right, on to the third and final project. For this, I'll be using an old favorite stencil. I've used this one several times, if you can tell by the junk that's on it. I'll be using this leaf in the top right-hand corner. Now, for this, I'm going to create my own stamps with some fun foam. This is just something I bought at, I don't even know where I bought this. This is from my kids' stash of crafty things. So I grabbed a piece of white. You can use any color. It's not going to matter. And you just die cut it. The trick to die cutting this is to run it through one time. Don't run it through and back again, not back and forth, back and forth. That's going to flatten it out too much. Run it through once, it will pop out. It might still be connected a little bit. Just give it a push with your finger and it will come out very cleanly. I die cut 3 small circles, and I'm going to attach these to acrylic blocks with some double-sided adhesive. This will come off. It's not going to stick to my acrylic block. A little bit of alcohol or Goo Gone, if you have serious trouble with it, will get it off. You can use removable adhesive if you wanted to. I was a little scared to use that because these are going to get really inky. These are very flat stamps. So you're going to get that ink and junk around on your acrylic blocks. It's just going to happen. So if you think your removable adhesive is good enough to take that, by all means use that. For this background, I'm going to use Rockin' Red, Orange Twist, and Limoncello inks from Catherine Pooler. I went ahead and put that stencil over my panel. Again, white cardstock panel that's A2 in size. And I'll start inking up my stamps that I made. These little foam dots, you just need to prime them a little bit. Ink them up a few times, stamp them off on some scrap paper, then you can start stamping with them. I'm just going to layer up these dots through the stencil. Now you can see these are flat, so they get that ink around them, so just be careful. A little word of warning as well, I did mine wrong. Do not do what you see me doing here. You need to start off with your lightest ink color and go to your darkest. I should have started off with the Limoncello, went to my Orange Twist, and then Rockin' Red. If you start off with the darkest, you will pick up colors when you go to your lightest color from the stencil. These are going to stay wet on the stencil. You're going to pick it up when you stamp it down. That's just the way it will. The ink colors will transfer, but if you just work in the opposite order that I did, it will all be good. Or go with your lightest color first. It will also go a lot quicker. You can see here that once I had stamped and I picked up that red on the stamp, I had to stamp off my foam dot on my scrap piece of paper until all the red was gone. And then come back in and ink it up again, stamp it down, wipe it off, ink it up, stamp it down. If you go in the opposite order, you'll be good to go. I continued to fill up my leaf though with all these different colors, making sure they were overlapping. You had them over the sides of the stencil, so everything's going to be nice and defined. You don't want any open edges on this, or you're not going to get the stencil shape, and then it's just going to look like a big blob of circles on your paper. So make sure you're going over those edges and then fill in the center from there, and that will give you your outline of your image. So the fun thing about this technique is it does not have to be the stencil, and it does not have to be circle die cuts. you can switch this up and do whatever you want. So you could do a large star stencil and do very tiny stars stamped on the inside of it, or do a very large circle and maybe do balloon die cuts on it. It really is a really fun one to play around with and get some more use out of your stencils and more use out of your dies as well, and not just use them as die cuts. So once I had it filled up with my color, I took it off the panel, wiped it down, because if you wipe that on, it's going to swipe all the color over the top of it, and then lined it back up. I'm going to ink blend the edges with this just to blend it in a little bit. I used my makeup brush and the Over Coffee ink from Catherine Pooler. Then I felt like it needed a little bit something more, so I came in with this antique gold. It's a modeling paste from the Crafter's Workshop, and I'm using a makeup sponge just to dab it on the very edges and tips of that leaf for a nice gilded look without all the mess of gilding flakes. It's a really neat look that you can get just by using this modeling paste and your makeup sponge, which is super fun and a whole lot less messy than gilding flakes. I do not like getting those out. They are a mess to clean up. So once I felt like I had all the edges gilded enough, I'm going to go ahead and remove that stencil and take up my tape off of that panel that I was working on. You can see I had a little bit of ink down in the bottom right-hand corner. That's okay. It's all going to be covered up because I made this into a shaker card. If you know me, you know that I love a good shaker card and I love to give them. So what I did was I actually added a few of the gold cat scrappiness jewels around the leaf itself. Just glued them onto the panel. Then I took my wood frame die, or my wood grain frame die from Cat Scrappiness, cut that out from craft cardstock, added some acetate, and stamped a thanks sentiment with some of the Imagine Stays On pigment ink. I filled up my shaker card with some sequins, put it over the background, and there is a super simple shaker card. Really, really easy and a lot of fun too. That is the finished card. I hope you guys enjoyed this super long video. One final look at all these different projects with some stamping through stenciling. I hope you got inspired and you can use this technique for your card making as well. That's going to do it for me. I want to thank you guys for watching today. Don't forget all the information down in the description box, and there are links off to the left if you want to see some more videos from me. Happy crafting, everyone!